Hello, everyone. Welcome to In the Corner, the place where every cricketer wants to be. I'm your host, Callum, and thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of the podcast. It's been a while since we've done this. Taken a break from the podcast. Been around Europe for a little bit in Spain, but it's great to be back in Australia, and obviously great to be here for the summer of cricket. We've got the Border-Gavaskar Trophy, which is starting tomorrow in Perth at Optus Stadium in what is probably the most anticipated test series in recent memory. India have not lost the Border-Gavaskar Trophy for the last 10 years. The last time that Australia won the series was in 2014-15. So, yeah, it's been a long time between drinks for the Australian cricket team, but I'm very confident that they will be able to get the job done in this series. Now, before we get started, we just want to thank all of our sponsors. In the Corner would not be possible if it wasn't for all of our sponsors, which are Macron Adelaide, Ray White Henley Beach, Cooper Cricket, ORTC Clothing Co., Pitch It Up, AX Sports, and T20 Vision sunglasses. So thank you to all of our wonderful sponsors for your support, and we hope that we can continue to work with you in the future. So 5-test series, first time that it's been 5 tests, and I honestly think that Australia-India is almost at the point where it's going to overtake the Ashes, particularly with India being so dominant in Test cricket, and being able to perform overseas as well in the last sort of 7 to 8 years, which is really exciting. It actually gives the Australians a bit of a challenge. Normally, we're flat track bullies here once when the summer comes around. So it will be really good to have some high quality Test cricket. First test is in Adelaide, then we move to Adelaide Oval, my hometown, for the day-night Test match, which should be amazing. Up to the Gabba before Christmas, then the traditional Boxing Day and New Year's tests in Melbourne and Sydney, respectively. The search for David Warner has concluded. The selection panel, George Bailey, Ronnie McDonald, and Pat Cummins, have decided that Nathan McSweeny from South Australia, originally from Queensland, is the man to open the batting alongside Usman Khawaja. And I'm mixed on this. I think it's great for McSweeny. I genuinely think he deserves an opportunity. But what does this say about the Australian first class setup if Bancroft, Marcus Harris, Constas, and Renshaw are not getting a look in? It just means Australian selectors do not have faith in any of the openers around the country if someone who is normally batting number 3 or 4 for their state is being chosen to open the batting for the national side. I just think it doesn't give Shield cricket openers any confidence that if they're going to be scoring runs, they're going to be selected. I think it was an absolute travesty that Steve Smith opened the batting last summer. I've been very critical at that move. I think it just says very, very much about the way that Cricket Australia has been set up to, just basically force someone to move up the top of the order so that Cameron Green could get in the side. And I think Australian cricket's pretty lucky that Cameron Green's been injured. Obviously not that for the injury itself, but with the way that it's been able to sort of ease the selection issues that they were going to have in terms of, was Smith still going to bat at the top? I never thought he was. Was Mitch Marsh going to go to the top, or Travis Head going to go to the top? It's all settled now. McSweeny, I really like him. I think he's very technical. I think it's great for a left and right-handers to be opening batting. Potentially they could have gone with someone a little bit more aggressive, or they could have gone with the kid, Constas. But I think Constas is not ready yet, and we kind of saw that in the India A series. He got a couple of Shield hundreds against South Australia, sort of early in the season. But, I think we've seen that if young openers come in and don't do so well, it can really affect them in the long run. So Khawaja's probably got maximum 12 months in Test cricket left after the Ashes next year. So I think by that point, it will be a great time to blood Constas into the team. And hopefully McSweeny has established himself. 3 South Australians in the side, which is, I don't think, happened too often in the history of the Australian team. But I think it's a big series for Marnus Labuschagne. Has pretty much been gone missing for the last couple of years. I don't think he's been really doing enough to, cement his spot in the side. And I think if he has a first sort of three lean test matches, then I think his spot could come under threat. And I don't think he will ever actually get dropped, but I would think that they would need to start having some sort of conversations because, we've got a tour of Sri Lanka coming up as well after this series. We want our batters to be in really good form and what can be very difficult wickets in goal. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of pressure on Marnus. I'm really hoping that Steve Smith can return to some of his best. I think him and Kohli are at pretty similar sort of periods in their career. Kohli's had a really lean trot for the last 3 years, but I think Smith and Kohli, hopefully they're both gearing themselves up for a really big series. And I think world cricket kind of needs it. Joe Root's been doing superb since COVID, really. I think Joe Root's really stepped up, and ever since he ditched the English captaincy, he's really taken up in terms of the Fab Four. So, yeah, it would be really interesting to see how that goes. India not coming into this series with fantastic form, a 3-0 whitewash loss to New Zealand in their own backyard. But I do think the Australian pitches are going to suit India so much more than what they've been batting on back in India. In India, batsmen have been averaging about 35 with the bat. In the sort of last 10 years, that number's been around 45. In the last 3 years, it's been down to 35, 30. So, yeah, they're obviously very spin heavy wickets in India. Someone like Ajaz Patel wouldn't normally play a game in Western conditions, but purely gets those games in the subcontinent on those types of wickets. So, massive pressure on Rohit Sharma. He's going to miss the first test match due to the birth of a child, and congratulations to Rohit Sharma on that. Perfectly understandable reason to miss a game of test match cricket. Family comes first. But no Sharma just leaves a massive hole in the leadership space for India. Jasprit Bumrah is going to be captain, and he has captained India before. But it is a massive responsibility to captain your country in the first test match of the series. So the timing for Rohit Sharma could certainly be a lot better, but he has not been in fantastic form. Tim Southee absolutely dominated him in that series in India, and Australia obviously has the big three in Stark, Cummins and Hazelwood, so that's going to be a massive challenge. Jaswal, he is a superb talent at the top of the order, and I think he's really going to like batting in Australia. The only thing with Jaswal is he can sort of play away from his body on a 45-degree angle with the bat. And in Australia, you either want to be, right out towards point when you're hitting the ball, or you want to have the bat face nice and straight towards mid-on and mid-off as much as possible. So they can get in that sort of danger area with those types of shots. Shubman Gill's going to be missing the first test, probably the second test as well, with a fractured thumb. That's a massive loss. He batted quite well for India last time they were out at Australia. He was batting at the top of the order then, but now he's moved down to number 3. Virat Kohli has been averaging 27 in Test cricket for the last 3 years. So, quite a massive decline in his form. Obviously has had form in ODI cricket and T20 cricket in years gone by. But yeah, particularly in Test cricket, last 3 years, very lean trot. So it'll be very interesting to see in terms of the number 5 and number 6 spots, whether they decide to go for Sarfraz Khan or Jarrell, who played in the England Test series. Sarfraz made 150 against New Zealand in the first test as well. So it'll be interesting to see. I think Jarrell probably looks the more technically correct player. But Sarfraz can take the game away from an opposition. Rishabh Pant, it's great to see him back in Australia. He didn't participate in the last Border-Gavaskar Trophy in 2023, which was in India, due to that horrible accident. But I think Australians are just so keen to watch this young man back. He's just such an entertainment provider, along with Kohli. I think Rishabh Pant is the player that people are most looking forward to watching. And then India, in their last couple of tours of Australia have really dominated with their fast bowling. Jasprit Bumrah, obviously, superb talent and will be captaining India in this first Test match, the leader of the attack for quite some time. Then you've got Mohammad Suraj. No Mohammad Shami. I think that's a big loss. I think Shami will be brought into the squad later in the series, particularly if India maybe go one or two down early in this Test series. I think, if they can get him back up towards the end of the series, I think that would be massive. He's only just returned to competitive cricket um, in the last couple of weeks. So hopefully, for an Indian point of view, he will be back. And Akashdeep, I think, is the one that's really going to impress. He's played a couple of Test matches against New Zealand and England as well. He bowls in the 140s. I think his bounce and height is going to suit the pitches that we have here in Australia. So it'll be interesting to see how India line up in terms of their bowlers. And then you've got the two spinners in Ravi Jadeja and Ashwin, who have learned how to bowl really well in Australia, particularly on that last tour in 2020/21. Both of them were able to tie up an end and allow the quicks to rotate, similar to what the Australians do with Nathan Lyon and the big three quicks. So whether they decide to play two spinners will be interesting. I think if only one spinner is going to play, that's going to be Jadeja, because he'll bat at 7, provides that batting option, and then it will allow India to play 4 seamers in their attack. And considering that a couple of their seamers are a little bit inexperienced in Australia, that might be the way to go. But that Ashwin's obviously going to give you a little bit with the bat, and he's obviously going to be very accurate, and does have the wood over a couple of Australians. He bowled really well out here in the last 2 series before getting injured. So in terms of who are the big men in this series, there's obviously a lot of emphasis on Virat Kohli, but I certainly think Jaswal will be the leading run scorer for India. I just love the talent that this kid has. Moved out of home at the age of 10 and lived in a tent in Mumbai to pursue cricket, and has been noticed due to his performances with the Rajasthan Royals, which has certainly elevated his status. But the fact that he's been able to get into this Test side and score runs at a very quick strike rate, I think he's going to do well. It'll be interesting, the battle between him and Mitchell Starc. I think obviously Mitchell Starc has the ability to bowl Jaffa deliveries, but move the ball moving away from the left-hander, and Jaswal liking to play aggressive cricket, could bring that slip scoring into play. So I think Jaswal is going to be the leading run scorer for India. In terms of leading wicket taker, I think the obvious one is Bumrah, but I'm actually going to go with Mohammad Siraj. Bowled very well out here last time, 13 wickets in 3 Test matches in Australia previously. So I think there's going to be a lot of emphasis on Bumrah. The Australians going to be very cautious against him. So I think Suraj will be the one that will take the most wickets for India this series. In terms of the Australians, I would love Steve Smith to get back to his best and be the leading run scorer, but everyone said Smithy is going to be the leading run scorer. So I'm actually going to go with Travis Head. I think he's been in superb form in 2024. He's been super aggressive. And if Marnus, Uzi, and McSweeny and Smith can obviously bat long periods, it allows Head to come in at number 5 and do what he does best. So, yeah, he had a pretty lean summer in Test cricket last year. So hopefully Travis Head can bounce back and get back to his best. So in terms of a scoreline, despite the fact that India lost 3-0 against New Zealand, I do think it's going to be a very close Test series. I'm probably leaning towards 3-1 towards Australia at this point in time. If India can find a way to somehow win one of the first 2 Test matches before going to Sydney and Melbourne in particular, where those wickets tend to be a little bit flatter, I think India are a massive shot of knocking off Australia. But Bumrah is going to have a massive series. There's so much reliance on him for India to get the job done. So, yeah, if Bumrah can take 20 plus wickets in this series or 25 plus wickets in this series, I think it goes a long way to India being very competitive. if the Australians can handle Bumrah really well, it will be very interesting to see how it goes. Some commentators predicting 4-0 to Australia. I don't see the two sides being that far apart, but I think somewhere around a 3-1 or a 3-2 scoreline would be fantastic. Ideally, 2-2 going into the last test in Sydney, but with the rain that's in Sydney, good luck with that. And getting a result there due to their weather patterns. So that's my predictions for the Border-Gavaskar Trophy. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. Make sure that you subscribe to the podcast and follow our social media pages for more exciting content for the series. We're going to be doing a wrap-up of every single test match, and if we can find some guest panelists, I would love to do videos every day at the end of play, so make sure that you comment below if you are interested in jumping on the podcast. Thanks very much for tuning in. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.